when Heartbeat came out, Larry was playing that, and nobody really wanted to hear that. Like they would, like, oh, again, you know. And I remember the first time in the summer when I heard that record outside, and it's, everybody at the time had the box, and all you heard was WBLS. When they play that, and you heard it like all around, like it was like the whole New York was hearing the same station at the same time. It was like an echo, and it's just, to me, it's just, aside from being nostalgic reasons, but it means a lot. It's personal.
So today is um, Monday, June 23rd, 2025. Who are we speaking with?
You're speaking with Elbin Reyes. Yes. Um, um, I guess a music lover, a record connoisseur, a collector. Uh, been in the scene for a while. Um, just dibble and dabbling here and there with the music, but it's more like a hobby to me. You know.
How many
Yeah.
records are in your collection?
Um. Everybody asks me that same question all the time. I get that like periodically, like every other day.
Yeah,
I lost, I never counted, so I don't know. All
yeah.
I know is I have an apartment full and two storages.
Okay.
Yeah, but um I've been collecting for a lot of years, you know, um basically my whole life. I started at a young age, probably like maybe 10 years old, collecting records, 45s, and it's been a long journey ever since, so I had, it's so much,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Um, let me find the right question. Uh, Broadway 96.
uh that was the neighborhood club. It was in, uh well, we had to take the train, but it was just a few stops down on the one train.
Uh-huh.
And basically, I think it became a bank. I think a Chase or a Citibank after it closed. But it was also at one time called the Latin Quarters after Broadway 96. Broadway 96 was in the mid 80s. It was actually when the whole Webbo era, had just come out. And basically everybody with the Chinese slippers, the baggy pants, the capijos, and the cutoff t-shirts. And that was a club that it didn't last that long, but it was really, really nice. They had a really nice sound system. It was low ceilings. It was on a second floor. They had like white speakers, and actually the DJ was a very good DJ that basically he passed away. He was unsung, I guess. He didn't really get the notoriety. His name was Raul Soto. Really good, like technically and selection wise. He was really, really good. Actually, him and Kenny Carpenter were two of the DJs that I really followed at that time, and both of them, I don't know if they belong to the record pool, but they were always playing not the domestic stuff, but a lot of the imports from overseas. And I guess they would just with their own money go out and buy these records. But we were always hearing things that you wouldn't hear at other places. It was a nice club. You would get people coming from Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island. A lot of graffiti writers used to frequent that club, and also at that time there was a gang up here called the Ball Busters, and they used to hang out there. And like always, they were always starting fights and stuff. So the club didn't last long. Yeah, but it was a nice space. It was definitely a nice time. Yeah, very, it had like booths, very old school, and a nice DJ booth. I remember me and one of my cousins, Gus, actually Joanne's brother, Joanne Jimenez. We would always go, and he always had a little pad and a pen and write down like the records, and we would like lean over the DJ booth, the glass part, to look at what he was playing and write down the names of the records. You know, yeah.
Wow. Tell us about the first time you went to the Paradise Garage.
The Paradise Garage. I think the first time, I think it was either with my cousin, Marco Reyes, and he was in For the Records, and he had a club of his own. But before that, before he started his own thing, he would, he would always talk about Larry this, Larry that. He tried to imitate and emulate him, and that was like his idol, his hero. And he took me there, and we went, and it was actually on a Saturday night, the core night, because he had the membership to the record pool. So we, he had comps, and we would go. And he became very good friends with Dave DePino, and the first time I remember walking in, and I think Larry was mixing. I told this story a million times. He was playing the Bee Gees, "You Should Be Dancing," and I never heard that record like that. I was used to hearing it on the radio, but in a big system like that, and the way it sounded, all the percussion and the clarity, it was out of this world. And then what Larry was playing at the time, a lot of the um, high energy stuff, the Euro disco, and just faster pace, what they call disco at the time. And I remember hearing Caress, and that was a Boris Mitney production, and Larry was working. He would always have two copies working that track, the break. And I remember telling Danny Crivet about that, what Larry did, and he told me, Elvin, I remember that like if it was yesterday, and I remember me recording it, editing it, making an edit, and giving it to Larry on a reel, so he wouldn't have to be working back and forth every time he would play that record. I go, wow, yeah. So that was like my first time, and I remember also I had on shorts, like really boom boom shorts, like really short shorts, and my one of my best friends, he told me, listen, this is a gay club, they're gonna try to approach you. You're like fresh meat. So he just says, just stand next to me, stand by the wall. We were right like underneath the booth. And he said, if they come up to you, just tell them you're straight. That's all, and sure enough, that was that, and I started frequently more than on Fridays. I would go because my cousin was busy with with the club thing, with his own place, and Friday uh, I became a member with some of my friends, and after that, I used to go to a lot of clubs, but after that, going to the garage, I didn't want to go anywhere else. You know, yeah.
What made the garage so special?
Um, I think the staff, the way everyone, like all the members, they definitely took care of the place, and it's like you would see someone like for instance if you nobody would throw garbage on the floor. If they see someone throw a piece of paper, some people would pick it up and take it to the garbage can. The club was always really, I would get there very early, like maybe 12 o'clock or a little bit before, and it was always like spotless. You still see people like cleaning, mopping, or whatever. And there was a lot of things that made it special. One time, I remember Larry, he took out a ladder, and I don't know if he was cleaning the mirror ball or fixing something, but there was something he was fixing something with the sound, and he actually, people just sat down on the floor, and he was playing like classical music, and then after he finished, he went up and he played, I think it was E2 E4 or Summer Madness, and forget it, everybody, and people were like kind of like a little bit frustrated, and you would hear like one or two boos and stuff, like like people complaining, but after that they forgot after he got on, and that was, I think that was special. Nobody did that before, and it was just the vibe, I guess the atmosphere in that place. It was definitely a musical sanctuary, and even like for instance, I remember Larry coming down, and even if he didn't know you, he would go. He remember faces, and he would come, and he always shook my hands, and then we finally met, and it was it was different. It was very very nice, well taken care of, everyone. I had a friend of mine's, may he rest in peace. Dave Lazada used to work there. He used to do the door sometimes when Dave wasn't doing the door, and I had another friend, Jose Len, that used to work there as well. And It was just a special place, just, first of all, they didn't sell alcohol. They had the punch and the fruits, and then of course, you had the theater, which I never really frequent. We never, but, I think it's probably a Woody Allen movie or something. I got to see that, but I would always go to the roof, just to take a break. And I remember being in the roof, and as soon as people heard like either City Country City by War or Infinity, Don't Go Away, you see people, everybody just scrambling, going down to the dance floor, and it was just the atmosphere in that place. Larry, he knew how to create a move. It was very special, way different, from the floor, having sand underneath for the wood so the people, they won't force their knees too much while they dance all night, to the lighting, to the sound system. I mean, everything, the whole club was based around the sound, and then the acoustic of the actual club. And also, you would go to the garage, I guess, every week, but there was always something different. It could have been a pin light, a strobe. They would change everything around all the time. I remember one time, I think that was the loudest I ever heard that system. And Larry was playing, I think it was Music is the Answer. But this was later on, like towards the end when they were closing. Basically, when the club, that's it. It might have been like 87, but it was really, really loud. I don't know if Larry was mad that the club was going to close. He was coming to an end, and he was playing Music is the Answer, and he was mixing it with Betty Wright, one step back, two step front. And he actually turned off all the lights, and it was like hot. And basically, when Larry would turn off all the lights, even the exit lights would come off, would turn off. And when he kept trying to mix the records, and he kept like going back and just back and just playing with people's head, I guess, until he got the mix right. And when he turned on the lights, it was all just red and smoke, just the whole club. It was just that, I guess the atmosphere in that place, it was just different than any other place, you know? Yeah. And the people too, the fashion, like again, like even in the late 80s when people were already getting hip to the club, it was almost closing, but you would see there all the time Mike Tyson, Eddie Murphy, Diana Ross, Keith Haring, I mean Bosky, everyone would hang out there, at the garage. That was the in place to be. Yeah. But there was other clubs too, but the garage was the garage. I wish I would have gone more to the loft, because as I got older, I became like more mature musically, and I started to understand more Dave Mancuso's concept and what he was creating and doing. But then again, it was two different. The garage, it was two different animals. The garage was size, the size of maybe a smaller than a football field. But I tell people the sound there, it was like if you was take these headphones and I would put my ears in, and you hear everything clearly, but in a big scale. And the loft was more audiophile. It was more clean, very intimate. Dave didn't play that loud, but it was different, But you heard all the details in the records, the music he would play, And the same thing with the garage, same thing, but at a bigger scale. Yeah.
Uh, was there a particular light at the garage that you'll never forget?
Um, I remember the strobes. They were double, like the beacons. I mean, they were like the police lights, the sirens, and they were doubles. So they would spin. They had like a pole in the middle, and they would go like this, and they had several of them everywhere, and they would just turn like that. That was one, and another one was the pins, the pin lights. So Larry, when let's say he would play um Always There or Love Hangover, or no, Clouds, Chaka Khan. And so he would, it was gonna rain. He would always put the confetti and then put on the pins so they look all white facing down, like if it was raining. That was, one of his things to do. And I think those lights, I still have them in my memory from that time, you know. Yeah, so much in that place. It was always different, you know. I was one that I wasn't too crazy about like live shows, but after seeing the shows there, like I had a change of mind, especially to me the best show there was Grace Jones, and hearing like all the like even when she did Slave to the Rhythm, for instance, like you hear that pin drop in the beginning, like everything sounded so clear. And Larry kept playing he always played her music, but he when that came out, that album, he would play like everything. It was so well produced, so well recorded, and he that's what he had ears for. And it was amazing to hear stuff like that in that magnitude. And it's been, over 30, almost 40 years, and I still haven't found a place like that, a sound system like that, and I think I'll never will. And basically when I hear something, that's what I'm looking for. Even, I always that's what I chase. And it's sad, I'm not gonna hear that. And then again, people try now, all these clubs and stuff, but people forget that, it's not just installing speakers, and a bunch of amps. The garage was fully, acoustically treated, from the ceiling to the walls, everything. And look, the garage had some of the walls in the back, they were metal and they were rigid, and still, you didn't hear the vibration. He had like on the ceiling, they had like those where those egg containers that they use for the eggs, and they were on the wall, like on top on the ceiling. So much, that they did to that place, and then that room, I think it was round. That made it even more special. Yeah, but it is what it is. I mean, we have to evolve and time change. I mean, I'm sure that this generation and the kids of today, they'll look back in 20 years and talk about the clubs that are happening now, like we did with the garage. Yeah.
That's true. Tell us a story about area, club area.
Uh, okay, area. That was like one of my favorite clubs. Um, I used to go to area every Sunday. We met a friend named Kevin. He was like a bar back. He used to work in the bar, and areas was it was a special club to me because I used to at the time I was working during my garage years and areas. I was working at Bergdorf Goodman, so I got to like bring a lot of the guys that used to work in the stock department. They were stock clerks to the garage. We would go outside to the nine building. They like to smoke weed at lunchtime and drink and stuff, and then go back to work. And we would talk and we all became friends. We were co-workers, and we ended up going to the garage. But and areas at the time, I got to meet one or two guys that used to do the windows for Bergdorf, and these guys used to work at areas doing the the display, and basically the whole club, they always had a theme every month, so they would change the decor inside the club. And I remember one time going, and they had like a dragon on the dance floor, like on the side, and the eyes, they were actually television sets inside the eyes. So the channels would change, and you see the dragon's eyes like changing. So it was really, really nice. I think one time they had like Matt Dillon, like naked, like with full of fruits when you walk that big hallway going in. They always had different people, even girls there, like naked. Area was very eclectic, like it was very artsy, fashion world, art meets music. And I started going to areas on Sundays, and believe it or not, that's when Timmy basically started. I know he started in Melons, but areas was when he really started. So this is way before the shelter, and at the same spot. um and I remember going there, and it was like maybe me and my friends, probably four of us, and we knew two other girls with a friend of mine's. It was just basically us and probably like about 5 or 10 other people. And Timmy at the time was playing. We were religiously there every Sunday and listening to Timmy. And Timmy at that time, he was mixing with the reel to reels from like all the stuff that Boy Jarvis was doing, all the tracks. and Timmy would ride all the classics back then, all the records with the tracks from Boy, and just ride the records. That was the beginning to me of Timmy. Like that was when Timmy was really on fire to me. That's the Timmy I knew, and that's like one of my favorite times. And I remember I had all the flyers areas. I lost them in one of my old apartments, and that's like one of my worst regrets. But I would have loved to show that to everyone now, but it definitely was a different club, really nice. And I remember sometimes, like on Saturdays, I got to go 1 or 2 times, and it being crowded outside, just like studio. Like it would get that packed, people to want to go in, and we would just call my friend Kevin, and he would come outside and get us in, and take us to the club. So we never really had problems then. We were there like every week, To be honest with you, back then is I would go out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, like for years, like every other day. And sometimes I remember working at Bergdorf, I would put boxes and hide the camera so they won't see me. And I would sleep like on top of boxes in the back in the stock room, being like a hangover from the night before, from going to the garage or any other place I would frequent, Yeah.
Tell us about some of the guest DJs that came through there, like Dave Morales and Merlin Bob.
Yeah, Dave Morales came through all the time. I remember Dave at the time. He was really, really skinny. He was young Dave, and he was walking with his friends. They were helping with the milk crates up to the booth there, and same thing. And then after that, I remember I think for at the time when they were doing the transition, I think when area was closing, they actually I remember I think some Japanese investors they came in and they changed the sound system around. I remember they had like those crown amps in the ceiling with the lights, and then the early first Shelter t-shirts, they had little lights that light up just like the amplifiers. And that's when Timmy and Merlin, they came in and started doing their thing there. And it started changing more, like anything else, just like I would say Body and Soul, it started, with probably like 20, 50 people, and then it grew to this massive party. Same thing with the Shelter. Then again, but the Shelter also, the later it was, that's when people really came in, 3, 4 o'clock. But Shelter was, the Shelter, I would go there early, and, Timmy was, on, and, he was like one of my favorites back then. So I would always, be there. Yeah. And then that's the thing too. Like I see now, so many people, and I'm good with faces, not maybe names, but a lot of the people like now that I don't remember seeing them back then. And I remember going, out a lot, and half of the people. I mean, I know a lot of people, and I seen from back then, but it's then again, it's been so many years, but I remember certain faces, from back then.
Tell us a story about Bonds International.
All right, Bonds to me, well, not to me, but that was the biggest club. That actually was a clothing store. It even had escalators, and Bonds was huge. Again, Bonds was another club that was Richard Long did the sound system at Bonds, and it was a huge, huge place, and it sounded very echoey in there because the booth was very high, the speakers were high. They had these these big balloons that would come off down from the ceiling, like the Statue of Liberty, and people would try to hang on to them to go up, and it was a really good club because you had so many areas where you wanted. You could chill out in the sofas, go to the back, same thing, go get some oranges from the bar. And that was Kenny Carpenter at Bonds. And I remember I got to see the Clash at Bonds. And me and my friends, we went to 40. One of my friends didn't have an ID, so we went and made him an ID, and we got like these bow ties to get in. But we were all a little older, and we got him in, and it was fun. We saw the Clash there, and then I even got to see one of the biggest Latin nights in Bonds, which was it must have been like 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was still a line around the corner, and it was the Gran Combo, Johnny Ventura and Oscar de Leon. And that was one of the huge, everybody was dressed in suits and the girls with high heels and stuff. And that was a big night. I remember I was seeing this girl and I told her, that I was sick. And she said, "Oh, you're not going to take me?" And the first thing when she walks in, she sees me with all my friends like hanging out, like right there, I got dumped, you know. But Bonds was the place. Like you heard a lot of good stuff. I also got to go not only with Kenny Carpenter. I used to go with when Reggie Wells. They had like special parties. Then and they were Junior Mama used to play. I can't like so much stuff that were coming out. Like, again, Kenny Carpenter was very playing all that stuff. Walking on Sunshine. Eddie Grant and all the nice records from that time. Yeah.
What happened to New York?
Like everyone says, I guess during the Giuliani era, when the cabaret laws and all that, and he came and became mayor and changed nightlife for good. I think after that, that was it. The grunginess and the seedy everything, just left. They turned Times Square into Disney World, Disneyland. So everything just changed. It you know I guess the people throughout, and everything has to change, I guess, for better. Gentrification, if you could call it that. Um, and I think even now you have so many people in New York that are not native New Yorkers, that they have few years here, and they really didn't get to know the real New York. It's different, growing up here, and not coming from the outside. What we did, like everything New York was special, was different, was very different. It was dangerous too, but in a good way, I think. Like you had the blackout, you had so much, like Times Square. It was the graffiti scene, just everything, like it's sad. A lot of it is gone now. It's different times, I guess.
Talk about today. Do you go out 6 nights a week today? And if not, like paint a picture of the scene in New York City today. Like, where do you go to get that magic that you used to get at the garage or the loft or
I
Bonds?
don't go out anymore. I might go to one or two parties. I went out like a couple of weeks ago. I went to Bradford's party, the Summer Madness party they had in the rooftop. I think Kai Oscar was playing, and but I don't go out. My thing now is uh, I rather stay home and listen to music and listen to stuff that I like than going out and just hearing somebody that's really not gonna do nothing for me musically. And I my thing is I work at Sacred at Cosmic Arts with Joe, so we always have live events. Joe always plays, and sometimes before he had like open like turntable for anyone to play, and I enjoy that there better. I go, we sit down and just listen, to really, music, not just a 4/4 all night, and that's the thing. I guess you outgrow it after a certain time, um, it's my mentality is different now. I mean, I still I will go out. I go out. I'm not saying I'm not. Actually, I wanted to go out Sunday to Public Records. They had, I think it was Geology and Tal from Rush Hour. He was in town, and I wouldn't mind going to that, but I ended up staying home. And I go out to certain parties. I can't say, but but it's like once in a blue, or maybe I might be with some friends. Hey, there's a party here. Let's go. And you know, like that, on a rush, but not really like every week, like to go out. Nah, yeah. And basically, I listen to now, like I'm more with the jazz stuff, more mellow stuff, more ambient, So I'm not, like I think I'm not saying they're over my house days, but I don't, I prefer listening to to Coltrane or to Carlos Garnett, somebody else, like just different things, you know. Yeah.
Let's go back to the beginning. Describe the neighborhood you grew up in and how it shaped your love for music.
Um. Well, my neighborhood has a lot of history. It's like an area where like some of the early graffiti writers were basically, people say the Bronx, but the Heights up here, that's where it started. So I'm borderline. If I walk one block, it's Washington Heights. Where I'm at now is Hamilton Heights. It's part of Harlem. So if I walk to Amsterdam, that's Sugar Hill. So basically, um, this neighborhood always had a lot of I guess both, the connection, Harlem and the Heights, a lot of history. And then also I guess the older guys and girls that from my neighborhood, I learned a lot from them and watching them. Like for instance, one of my neighbors, he passed like he probably was like one of the first ones to pass from AIDS. We didn't even know at the time, what was AIDS. And he's like one of the early first probably when maybe the first day the garage opened, that guy was there. And also another friend of mine's that a neighbor actually, he lived on the first floor. He won a trophy dancing. So all the older guys from my neighborhood, they all grew up. They were always going to all the clubs. They would go to the Footsteps, the Cork and Bottle, Joey Sans. They would go to the Bronx 310 and a half, Mariposa. They would go to the Cork and Bottle, Crisco, Boomba Macau, like all the clubs. And I learned from these guys. And as I got older, some of the guys that were still around, they would go to Starship, and that's when I started. Starship, Inferno, Bonds, Garage, the Loft. That was like the second, and but that what was good. We had like one of my friends, like a building across the around the corner. They had stoops, so we would always hang out there with a boombox and talking. And like on Fridays, we're going to this club. We're getting ready. Everybody would go, shower, change, and then head out. Like a bunch of us in groups. Some of my friends, they would travel. Like the older guys, they would go out to Brooklyn to the Orange Peel, to Revelations. And just like all over, I got to learn from all these guys, like, all the different clubs. I remember one of my friends, an older guy, he told me, he happened to be walking to like on Broadway, and he ended up with a friend of his going to the Broadway loft, the first loft before Prince. And it was just a coincidence. My cousin, I learned a lot from him. He basically was like my mentor, and Marco Reyes, and he actually went to all these clubs. And then aside from that, he was in the record pool. So I would go with him to the record pools to pick up records, to the record labels to pick up, the record companies at the time to pick up records as well. And so I learned a lot from him and also my other cousin, Gus Jimenez. And then one of my best friend at the time, Robert Ramirez, he's in Florida now. We that was like my partner. We would go everywhere, like, areas, Garage, Inferno, like all the places, Bonds, but it's a lot of history in my neighborhood, very rich. And even there's tons of people from the scene that live around here, but they're all scattered, and it's like when I used to, I used to drive. So after the club, people, hey, you going home? Let me drive you, like, oh, can I get a ride with you? And I would just be in Harlem dropping off everyone, Yeah. So, I mean, it's a lot of history up here, like when it comes to music. As a matter of fact, down a block from me, it's still there. It was Duke Ellington's apartment, and I don't know if it's a relative or somebody. They have that, they preserve it, and they also did like a little mural, a statue, like a jazz thing, by the park on Riverside, and it's just so many people. The Eileens used to live down the block. Release Yourself, like 2 blocks down on 155th. You had a whole bunch of jazz artists like right there on Riverside that came from so much history here. Actually, I was when I was young. I must have been like probably like about 16. There was a warehouse, a building on 155th Street, and we had no idea. So we would just, like sneak into these buildings, and this was like almost like a warehouse, and we happened to be in there, and we found a bunch of PMP records in there, and all my friends started like throwing them around, like if they were frisbee, and I was like grabbing them, like, yo, why are you doing that? And I kept a few of them, and they were like brand new, and they also had like a bunch of boxes of marshmallow pies and moon pies. And it's funny because I saw Peter Brown one time, and I told him about that. He says, "Yeah, that was we used to, that was a warehouse to keep records there in 155th Street, you know." And it's so much like you're in this neighborhood, but you don't know who could be your neighbor next. Like somebody famous, Garrett Morrison from Saturday Night Live. He lived down the block as well. So much history. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about records. What was the first record that you bought, and why did you buy it? What made you choose that record?
Um, I think the first record, it might have been it was either I think it was Somacosa, and the reason of 45. And the thing is, what made me buy that, I was like young, and the building I used to live next door, um, a friend of mine had a party in his house, and I remember they had like one little strobe, and I'm over here like a little kid in the corner sitting down, and all these older guys, like grinding with girls, dancing the slow records, Barry White and this, and I'm over here like looking like wow, and after that it was just like in the late mid 70s I already had started getting 45s. And another thing is we had two record stores, two mom and pop shops nearby. I live in 153rd, and right there in 150 50th, there was a shop, a record shop, and then this lady had one in 148th. So I had two shops nearby, and then as I started discovering the 12 inches, I started heading downtown. That's when I went to like Music Factory, I think J&R. We used to go to uh, there was, I think she was related to Shirley, the lady that owns Rock and Soul. They had another little store like in the 30s on, I think it was 8th Avenue or 9th. And I started going to downstairs, and just it became a monster then, then vinyl, then dance track. And so, but I would go everywhere. We had a nice store. It was owned actually by these Russians in 181st Street and Fort Washington. And they used to have like all the imports, all the from Europe. They would get like Voyage, USA European Connection, and all that stuff. The Alex R. Constantino stuff. Um, and yeah, so after that, a lot of people know the stories because I told them. A lot of people don't, but um, I used to be a glazier. I used to work with glass and mirrors, and when I started working, I met this guy. We became really good friends. Named Stan Hasaki. He's the guy that opened up Dance Tracks, and basically I was supposed to be his silent partner for Dance Track. He wanted me to be a partner, and what happened was he came over to my house one day at lunch. And when I took him to my apartment, he saw all the records and the equipment. He's like, wow, this is Elvin. You never told me this. I go, you never asked, So it happens to be, he says, yo, I want to open up a record store. He brought me the next day. He came to work with flyers of him and his brother. They used to live in Jamaica at Queens, and they used to do like block parties. And he brought me some flyers and stuff to look at. And then I remember him telling me, I want to open up a record store. He says, will you, come with me to work? I go, listen, man, I just got married. I just had a baby. My wife just, I have a newborn. I can't, I wish I could, but I told him, listen, I'll go and I'll help you. And I'll try to get all the distributors for you, show you, all the supplies and everything. And sure enough, in 2 weeks, he came, he borrowed money from family, friends, and he opened up Dance Tracks. And then after, several years, him and his wife, they opened up the shop and Dora. And after that, I guess he was tired of this, I don't know what happened, he had like, I guess, personal problems, and he got rid of the store. And that's when, Joe came in with Stan. I mean, with Stefan, you know, and they opened up, the new dance tracks. Yeah.
Wow.
And, yeah. I
Talk to us.
remember, yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I remember Joe, sending me the invite and telling me, "Yo, Elvin, come down and see what we're doing, the new store." And it was still sawdust. He was doing the console, installing the speakers, and getting everything ready. That basically, Dance Track was like a meat pack, like a meat market or something. I remember they had the big refrigerators in the back, and we started putting records in the back and stuff. So I would go every day, like sometimes after work, and help out Stan. But it was difficult because at the time I was living in Yonkers, and I had a newborn, and I didn't want to leave the wife alone with the baby, and it was hard because I had to go pick her up at work and then pick up the baby at the babysitter. Yeah.
Talk to us about your early jobs. How did your early jobs, like working at Burger King, fund your musical journey?
Oh, okay. Um, well, I worked at Bergdorf. It was a clothing store. That was early. But before that, before Bergdorf, I did work at Burger King, and I worked at this restaurant. My family had moved. My dad got a house, and we moved to Massachusetts for 1 year. And sure enough, uh, there was a record store like probably like 3 blocks away from my house. So I started working, and I would freak in the store. They were called Strawberries. I think they had like franchise all over Boston and the Metro Boston area. And I would go and look at that time I was just looking at records, like even the covers. If they looked interesting, I was buying them without hearing them. Because back then a lot of places didn't have like turntables like now for you to listen to the records, and they didn't have like a DJ or music, someone playing the records. Yeah. But that's how I started it. And then after that, the summer jobs as well, to get equipment and records too. I remember I brought early on a record collection from a friend, and basically he was in a special. He would get, I don't know if he was a reporter, but he would get records from WKTU, like, and I got a lot of that stuff from him, and I guess it was from the companies as well, because they would give him records. And this guy was like, he was into the hip hop, like scratching. I remember a lot of his records, they had like the 45s on the 12 to cover, so they won't see the name, but also to grab it and to spin it. Yeah.
Talk to us about your journey from casually buying records to becoming a serious collector. Like, what made that switch? What was triggering going from just casually buying records to being a collector?
um, I think I remember I remember going to, these were later on, like stores like Sound Library, Good Records, Big City. These were all stores, little stores in the East Village, and this was before the internet, like basically before Discogs. I'm not sure if it was. I don't think Discog was around, but you saw, like, I got to see stuff on the wall, and and I said, wow, this looks interesting. And then I would see the customers that would go there and get these things, and these particular records, and then just I guess going around and listen, my palette started changing, getting very more mature. Same thing, like for instance, when I way before, when I used to go to Charlie, to Vinyl Mania, Charlie always had the rope line on top on the ceiling, and he had the expensive records on top. So a lot of these records, I would tell Charlie or Judy, whoever was there, oh, I want that. Can you bring it down? Even though they were expensive, I know I was going to be broke, but some of them I didn't even know what it was. But and me choosing, I got to pick out like Izimbra, you know, uh, uh, um, Who else? Walking on Thin Ice, stuff that Sylvester, stuff that he had on the up on the clothesline. But as I got older, my taste, started just changing. And I think I remember just hanging out with different people and learning different things. And then even the loft, I started maturing more musically, and collecting, you know, like the rare stuff. And then again, I owe a lot to a lot of friends, a lot of guys that were older than me, a lot of mentors that were before me and that taught me the ropes, and yeah, but again, I guess I learned a lot through trial and error, just going and, I'm very, I like to do my research and homework when it comes to music, to records, you know, and, and digging, that's always been my life, you know? Yeah.
What does it mean to be a record connoisseur in your eyes?
Um, I guess it's like, it's not quantity, but, it's just quality. And also, um, just to have, I'm very eclectic, so I'll buy rock, prog rock, krautrock rock, German stuff, African, Brazilian, just a little bit of everything. If it's good, it's good. I tell people always, this is like my saying, like, there's no bad music, it's just different ears. People have like different tastes, and I remember before, I would go to A1 to Academy, and we would go like on Thursday, all the guys, and some of the guys that were starting out or were just there, they would see me digging and they would all be behind me. Like, and I would turn around and tell them, like, listen, I would pass certain things to, like, you need this, you got to get this. But I would tell them, like, don't buy something because I'm buying it, like create your own taste, and I might like a techno track and you might not, you might take it because I'm buying it, but when you get home, you're not gonna like it. But I already envision myself playing that in a set, or playing it somewhere, you know, that's gonna be accepted, and you have to create your own taste, you can't just go by what I'm buying. And it was always like hard for me to dig with other guys because it was a bunch, sometimes my peace of mind was being in the store by myself and just without the phone ringing back then, without the beeper, like, but just me by myself, like, and just like going through, all the different categories, genres, and just searching and looking for stuff, and that was my little world, with no bother from no one, and just trying to find good stuff.
How do you decide which records are worth keeping and which ones you're going to let go of?
That's a hard one. I actually I haven't really sold much records. I could count with my hands how many records I sold, and I regret selling. I must have sold like in my maybe 5 records, and they were very expensive records, and I regret selling them. But I had double copies, and I definitely need to weed out my collection and start. I can't, this can't keep going because it's become a monster. So I definitely need to weed out. But as I've gotten, again, more inclined, more mature with my, with what I want, I think there's a lot of stuff I'm getting rid of. Definitely, for sure. I know what to get rid of and what to keep. You know, there's there's certain records that mean a lot to me, that and that's the thing, like a lot of these records now, we lived it, we were there, we danced, through bad thick fin whatever, bad times, we heard these records. I remember, like a lot of them have sentimental values to me, you know a lot of the records I remember, like for instance, when Heartbeat came out, Larry was playing that and nobody really wanted to hear that. Like they would, like, oh, again, you know. And I remember the first time in the summer when I heard that record outside, and it's, everybody at the time had the box and all you heard was WBLS. when they play that and you heard it like all around, like it was like the whole New York was hearing the same station at the same time. It was like an echo, and it's just, to me, it's just, aside from being nostalgic reasons, but it means a lot. It's personal. A lot of these records, they have, just, I could probably, a lot of stories with all these records. There was a time in my life, I was doing this, I was doing that, and they mean a lot to me.
That leads me to my next question. What role does memory and emotion play in your record collection?
Um, it plays to me. It is very, I guess, maybe deep or personal, but I don't consider myself a DJ, but more of a collector. But when I do play, again, and that's from learning from the older DJs from back then, and they would make records talk to each other, and say a story. Me personally, I like to, when if I play a record, I'm feeling that record and I believe in that record. So I want to transpire or transcend that record to the person that's dancing, you know, and basically is you know just what I'm feeling, and that's the same thing. Like I if I like a record a lot, and I feel it, and I told guys, hey, listen, get this, hey girl, get this, get that, it's because I believe in that record, and I know it's a good record, and I know it's going to be probably, maybe not, maybe it won't blow up big, but it's something, it'll become maybe a future classic or something. But I when I believe in a record, is there's something about it, it could be just the sonics of the record to me. I also go by a lot with the sonic, the way records sound, and I also like to collect a lot of imports, and they sound different than the American pressings. I'm into collecting the UK pressings, German pressings, some Japanese, and Italian and French, and from everywhere. Yeah. But I think that's my thing, with I try to, whatever I'm feeling, the emotions, and feed it to the people that are on the dance floor, and that's how I learn, and that's the school I went to, the garage. I went, Larry was the teacher. That's where, I think I learned that from. you know like, like Ivy said, you don't see that anymore. People dancing to a beautiful record, a pretty record. you know and back then, people would dance to a slow record. If it's not 125 now, fast BPM, you know it's not. But that's life. We move on. Everything changes.
When you're playing records for a crowd, tell us a story about the time when you realized the crowd was connecting to what you were playing.
um there's been lots of moments, and I have played records, and I'm basically crying, like tears in the booth, and I tried to hide it, and I think those are moments, that it's just me and the music, and whatever, I'm guess they'll feel what I'm feeling, while they're dancing. Um, I remember when Carlos Sanchez passed away, and he rest in peace, and he had called me like maybe 2 days before he passed, and he left me a message because at the time I was in the hospital with COVID and stuff, and he left me a message. I was already, I think, I'm not sure if I was out the hospital, and he left me a message. So when I heard the message, I was like, wow, and I always saved that voicemail, and I came and I recorded it, and we did something at Cosmic Arts one time, and I actually played Carlos' voice, and then I played um he's a friend of mine's, Eddie Kendricks. and every man, double exposure, and everybody was just feeling it. You know.
Thank you for sharing. How has
Yeah.
the yeah?
Yes.
How has the vibe on the dance floor changed from back in the day to now?
It's different. Like people just, side to side, like two steps, and basically everyone with their phones. It's the same thing like everyone else says. Um, and I like again going back, to the garage days, areas, there was never a circle, you know. There might have been a circle outside, like, you know, by the lounge area in the garage, but not on the dance floor, and same thing, the shelter early on, shelter, I think the circles, they started probably like 39th Street, when it was speed. But now it's, it's different. It's just, it's I feel more people from watching videos and from me traveling overseas. You see, people appreciate more the music out there, and they feel it more, and you see them, even though some people are with their, but you see that they get into it a little bit more. Here is more like uh it depends. It has to be somebody that's like really pounding them, like and but you don't see that anymore. You know, here it's different. Like the dance floors here. And then again, there's not that many clubs left either. You have nowadays, public records, then announced elsewhere, I guess. The knockdown centers is just little, and all these clubs, they have a lot of rules. It's like, you know. Then again, it would be nice, if everybody just leaves their phone. I know I'm one of them, but I'm either searching for records, but I wouldn't do it on the dance floor. I move to the side, and or just jamming something. But it's that's what it's come down to. You know, it's sad. You know, and even now, I feel like even some of the younger generation, especially in Brooklyn, the people that are into the rare groove stuff and all the, like just they collect Brazilian, African, whatever. These kids, they're not going out as much, and they prefer to have a nice little system in their house and their apartment, and just play to friends or for themselves. And a lot of people getting into that. You don't see people like, oh, I don't want to go see this person or that person. They just don't go out. You know, this times change, and we're living in different times.
What was it like attending record pool parties and hearing new music before everybody else?
Um, it was nice. I remember, I think it was on Wednesdays. So the garage would open for the record pool members, and they would test out. I think Danny used to play, Jonathan Fearing. Different people would come and play. Larry didn't really wanted people like, but he was part of the pool. I guess him and Judy, they came to an agreement to do that. And even going to the record companies was fun too. I remember, you had the records before anybody, and then again, you could have been playing in Brooklyn. I was in Manhattan, but it was just different areas, and we were probably playing the same thing, but far away from each other. And um and then again, a lot of the stuff that was coming from the pool, you wouldn't hear on the radio, just in the clubs. uh, uh, um I remember when I was working in Bergdorf. I remember one time Victor Rosado comes, and I ran into him in the streets. He said, "What you doing?" I said, "No, I'm on my lunch break." He said, let's go to A&M to pick up some stuff." I go, "All right," or Arista, and we went, and sure enough, I got two copies of Set Fire to Me, Willie Colon test presses, that from just hanging out. And that's the thing. I would go with my cousin. He would always take me to the record pool, or to the record company to pick up. Actually, that's how I met Dave Mancuso. He would do these tea parties at CBS. And at the time, Gail Bruzowitz, she's the one that used to run the dance department for CBS Columbia. And at the time, I think she was dating Francois, and Dave had like it was like a big conference table, and they would put the feedback sheets. So Dave had all this Mark Levinson equipment, and he had a lot of stuff on reel to reel and play it for us. And then when the day was over, the meeting, we would write the feedback from listening to the records or bring them back, and so we could get more records the next time we go. And he would give us records at the time, whatever was coming out. So I remember getting from him like Miles Davis, Dave Edmonds, a lot of stuff that I remember getting. I think at that time, Lisa, Cold Jam, I Want to Take You Home, like stuff like that. Damaris, What About This Love? So that's how I met David, not at the loft, like there. And I was a kid, and that was very generous of him because he didn't have to give me because I wasn't a working DJ at the time. I was just, tagging along, basically with my cousin. He was older, and same thing. Dave Lazada, he would go to all the companies to pick up, King Street, Bottom Line, whatever company he would go to, record label, and he would always bring, a copy for me, or two if I couldn't make it. Or if not, I would go with him, to Irma, to everywhere to pick up.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did Larry Levan teach you, directly or indirectly, about sound and musical journeys?
Um, Larry taught us, not only me, but everyone, I think is, you know, um, and he always said this, Larry was ahead of his time. He always said, it's like a train. You have to give the people a break. So Larry would play in sets. He would play like 4 records and then stop, pause, put an effect or do something and come fresh, and that I learned from him, like, the sequence, like also like um what I said earlier, like making records talk to each other, like with a message, and he loved doing that. He would play like message in our music. I love music. He would go, into that segue, and I, I I learned also like to read the crowd, and Larry was, he was good at that. Like certain records, like he would play for people, I think, and once he knew you was there every week, or he remember your face, he would play something that you would like. I think for me, I remember like looking up in the booth, and to me that was him playing for me, and that was Roy Ayers, can't stop the feeling, and it was just like that. Certain records, he would play, and he taught us a lot, about setting the mood, the atmosphere, just uh with sound. It was the acoustics. Larry would change, I think, certain hours, the cartridges on the needles, um, to the on the turntable, at a certain time to continue, that sound that. Also, at the time, he had the crossover. Larry would just bring up the bass a lot, not really, not like today. Everybody's going crazy with the isolator. It was different, but he also we also learned from like an opening DJ, like people that would open up for him, like Joey or David, and then when he came in, you already knew it was him because the limiters, you could take him off, and then he would get on, and you hear the club going from here to here, and I, I learned so much from going to that place, and the thing is, my cousin was opening up a place, and he was so infatuated with Larry, like everything he would do, he wanted to do the same thing. So I guess me hanging out with him learned a lot, like that same, follow that same stuff, you know. Um, Again, like my sound system, I built it around. I wanted to experience that same thing. So everything I try to get, whatever they had at the garage, like, so, so at the time we did learn, I learned a lot from these older guys and from Larry, but from Larry, he was definitely a musical teacher, from playing, just classical. He would play this group Tomita. They were Japanese, and they a lot of sound effect, like basically like ambient music, and you hear like like I guess maybe rain or he would play so much, you know, Wendy Carlos with the with the thunder and the storms and stuff like that. He was very, very creative. And that's, I think, what I learned from, just being creative with the music, you know.